Good evening and welcome to The Core, coming to you live from Channels Television Studios in Abuja, Nigeria. I am Gadria Ahmed. "168 groups representing Nigerian women, people with disability as well as young people are disappointed in President Muhammadu Buhari. Why? Because according to them, the president keeps reneging on campaign promises to ensure adequate representation of women, young people and people with disability in his cabinet. In an open letter written to the leadership of the National Assembly, the group cites the ruling party's manifesto as well as campaign promises to ensure at least 30% representation of women in cabinet as recommended by the 2006 National Gender Policy. No one under the age of 35 or with a disability has been appointed as a minister. Of the 43 nominated ministers, only 7 are women, a 15% representation, which is a far cry from the 30 to 35% promised and recommended by various national policy documents. The group say this is not only a breach of the promises made, but the cabinet is also not representative of Nigeria's population. So, why is the president breaking his promises, and what are the implications of a lack of inclusion in governance for Nigeria and her development? These are more questions on tonight's edition of The Core, but first, an overview of the issues.
Nigeria is estimated to have a population of about 200 million people. Out of this number, 49.3% are women. However, only a fraction of this population participate in governance. Statistics show that the largest representation of women we have had at the national or state assemblies from 1999 to date was in 2011, when 7 women made it to the Senate and 26 made it to the House of Representatives.
Out of the 469 members of the National Assembly, only 19 are women, with 12 of them in the House of Representatives, while 7 are in the Senate, a figure that aggregates to a mere 4.1%, which is not in accord with international best practices.
At the current National Assembly, women occupy only 7 out of the 109 Senate seats and only 12 out of 360 seats in the House of Representatives. And although 50% of the population is female, there is yet to be an elected female governor in any of the 36 states of the country.
I think we should listen to voice of the House.
This, to a very large extent, is a far cry from the United Nations call for at least a 35% representation for women. Perhaps Nigeria can take a cue from countries such as Rwanda, where 68% of women are elected as parliamentarians. This trend of underrepresentation has triggered many efforts by CSOs and women at large to address the need for more female inclusion in decision-making in Nigeria.
The Independent National Electoral Commission should adopt the policy of deregistering any political party that fail to adhere with the gender policy. Women need to organize themselves, continually educate and create awareness of the importance of voting for more women into political office and leadership positions. Nigerian women need to be aggressive in pressing for the implementation of the 3 important gender policies in all electoral process in future.
The numbers of women at the top are certainly not enough. We need to deliberately do more to support and uplift more women to the top.
The fact that when you have a woman in a list, it has to be seen as an element of participation to the power that can improve the quality of the political offer of a certain political party, and not merely a name on a list, because it's nice to have a name on the list.
Following these consistent calls, the president promised to ensure at the very least that 35% representation for women in the government. However, only 7 women out of 43 ministers were selected by the president for ministerial positions. That's a paltry 16%. However, women are not the only ones to suffer from a lack of inclusion in politics and governance. People living with disabilities also face what many will call exclusion. Available statistics show that over 25 million persons living in the country have one form of disability or the other. But we are yet to integrate them into governance and nation building.
Nigerian Disability Bill. In that bill, we request that MDAs should reserve some percentage of their employment opportunities to graduates with disabilities. Then for the unskilled ones, we can place them on monthly allowance.
Changing this narrative requires urgent attention, and experts say that social inclusion of women and people with disability is critical to nation building. Evidence shows no nation can thrive without doing this.
For our conversation today, I'm pleased to be joined by distinguished Senator Emmanuel Buacha, who represents Taraba South in the Nigerian Senate. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Mrs. Saudatu Mahdi is the Secretary General of Women's Rights Advancement and Protection Alternative, RAPA, an organization that works to actualize the legal rights of women in both the private and public sectors. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us.
Thank you, Kadria.
Mrs. Josephine Efa Chukuma is the Executive Director of Project Alert, a civil society organization that renders practical support to female victims of violence. Thank you, ma'am,
Thank you very much, Kadria.
And Mr. Abdusalam Ido Kamaluddin is the Special Assistant on Special Needs and Equal Opportunities to Nigeria's Speaker, Nigeria's House of Representatives Speaker. Sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we also have a studio audience who will join the conversation as we progress. Welcome all to the program. Those of you at home can also take part in this conversation by sending your comments using the channel's Twitter handle at Channels TV or my Twitter handle at Kadria Ahmed. Please don't forget to use the hashtag NGTheCore. Now, I want to start with you, Mrs. Josephine. Why, in your view, is the president failing to keep his promise of adequate representation of women and young people and people with disability in his cabinet?
In one simple sentence, I'll just say it's just lack of a political will to do that. It's about not wanting to do it, because if Mr. President wants to do that, and in line with campaign promises and in line with the national gender policy that is a document that we've had with us for over 10 years, since 2007, that says 35% inclusion of women, you know, in government and in politics and in public life, then Mr. President has no reason not to. So it's basically the lack of the political will to do that, and which is, in my own opinion, is quite insensitive, considering that these groups, women, persons with disability, you know, these were people who also voted. These were people who also, you know, participated. I mean, we participated in the electoral process. So why leave them out at this point during nominations, like the statistics you gave? Ministers, 43 and 7.
Yeah, let me bring in Ms. Saudatu Mahdi. She talks about a lack of sensitivity and a lack of will to simply do what he's promised to do. What are your thoughts?
Well, I want to consolidate on her issue of political will. When civil society groups and other human rights groups in this country speak to the issue of representation and quotas and all of that, we are told that the political parties are the main machinery to implement that. But that Mr. President, or whoever is at the state, as a state governor, has the latitude to place political will and say, these are also Nigerians who I have promised and that we have not seen. Again, when you speak to political will, remember that it's in this same country at one time, a head of government said every state governor must appoint a woman in his cabinet. And in a democracy where we imagine that representation is the key word, we find this very, very absent. And truly, I want to also speak of the legal frameworks. The legal frameworks are there abundant. And Mr. President really has no excuse not to include women in sufficient representative numbers, as well as persons with disabilities.
Okay, let me bring in the distinguished senator here. Time and time again, we hear these complaints about inclusion. Is it a problem, do you think, that we have a cabinet that has only 7 women, nobody under the age of 35, and not a single person with disability?
Well, I think there is quite a lot missing there. Let me start with the persons with disability. The 8th Senate passed a bill making it mandatory for every institution, public or private, to create a 5% slot for the disabled persons. Now, we expect, even in the cabinet, there should be a representative of the disabled persons. This in itself is a shortfall. In terms of women representation, I am of the view that they deserve a higher representation.
What is the ideal representation in your mind? The 30-35% that is recommended by policy documents, lower, higher?
30-35% is okay, but it will have been followed up with a legislative instrument to make it binding. You know, that is why government, or maybe the executive, has the opportunity to defend that lack of implementation of that representation. But I think for now, the executive has no excuse whatsoever to have underrepresented women, in my own opinion.
Mm.
Yes.
Mr. Kamaluddin, let me bring you in here. You work with the Speaker of Nigeria's House of Representatives. So in many ways, this is progress because you've been appointed to look at the issue of equal opportunities. What are your thoughts regarding appointments at the center here? Now we're talking about the President's cabinet and how your constituency has been represented, as well as the female representation.
Just like every other person here, I agree that Mr. President, having signed the Disability Act 2018, one surely would have expected at least 1 or 2 persons with disabilities in that particular cabinet. Let's be fair with ourselves. What we are seeing when we say that including inclusiveness in terms of the numbers of women and people with persons with disability in politics here, what we are seeing is that these people actually are capable of doing exactly what other people do. But due to one thing or the other, they were discriminated against. So it's not issue of political sympathization. It's a matter of political inclusiveness. So one would expect that Mr. President, having signed Disability Act, for instance, at least one person who have to complement the job he just did.
Okay,
yeah.
just let me bring you back in here, because he used the phrase there, for one reason or the other. And I'm trying to sort of understand what those reasons are. You talk about a lack of sensitivity on the part of the president and a lack of a will. Are there issues that underline that? So, for example, sometimes when you talk to people, they point to culture, they point to religion. And I'm just wondering, in the work that you've been doing, to what extent are those influences in terms of the way our policymakers see inclusion?
Thank you very much, Kadura. We can't run away from the word patriarchy as much as we try to dodge it. Nigeria is a very patriarchal society. So it's all this thing about men, men, men. That's layer one. The next layer is, in quotes, able. Like my brother said, it does not mean, it's not a favor we are asking of. Are we saying that there are no qualified women? Rwanda, Angola, Namibia, even Senegal has about 42% women in parliament. Are we saying we don't have qualified women? Are we saying that we don't have qualified persons with disability? Are we saying we don't have qualified young people? A lot. They were less than 30 or maybe 32 or 33 when they started, and they are still there. And then we say the young shall grow. When will they grow?
Okay, so, but the issues, Hajia Saudatu, is around culture again, and tradition and religion and embedded practices. To what extent are those factors in the decisions that our politicians make, or are they not factors at all?
I think, Kadir and my viewers, we need to be very clear about one thing. You cannot make a selection on when culture is applicable and when it is not applicable. You cannot speak of culture applying only when you need to recognize the role people played in your government or in your election or in your survival. The fact that women have been attested as the largest block of voters, the fact that women in this country have proven themselves. Today, Nigeria has the Secretary to the United Nations is a woman from Nigeria. Yes, she was a minister before she left. So, you see, I find it difficult when politicians play hot and cold around culture and around religion. It doesn't matter when we are voting. It doesn't matter when we are supporting them to make their promises. So, yes, it is a factor. Culture is put up, but I don't believe it is truthful, and I want to also plead with Nigerian politicians to be honest with themselves. A lot of them, given the opportunity, would have the kind of women who they think should be there. It's not those who could stand up to it, or it is not an absence. I don't believe there's an absence of quality and quantity of women who can contribute to the development of Nigeria. Nigeria is blessed. Nigeria is blessed with persons with disabilities of almost 25 million population, women making almost 50%. How do you leave nearly 60-something% of the population and imagine that you are developing it? We are not just recipients. We are asking for inclusion as a right. We are citizens of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have the capacity to contribute to its development, and we have proven ourselves.
Okay. It's important that I let you guys know that when I contacted the presidency for their comments, the presidential spokesman, Malam Garba Shehu, says that they take this criticism in good faith and that there are many more appointments to be made, and it is their hope that these groups will be happier with those appointments.
With all due respect,
okay,
to begin to disaggregate the position of women to an addendum, the position of persons with disability to an addendum. The central government is the Federal Executive Council on the State Executive Council, and representation at that level has to start. Yes. Whether there are other opportunities or not, there are Nigerians out there who also will fill those opportunities. And if care is not taken, it is the same picture and the same profile that will be seen.
Okay, we will carry on when we come back from this break. Don't go away. Welcome back. You are watching The Core, and we are discussing inclusion in government and in politics. Now, before the break, Hajia Saudatu, you're talking about the fact that women and people with disability and young people are seen almost like an addendum to governance when it comes to appointments as opposed to sort of the mainstream. I want to try and see maybe if we can understand why is inclusion important? Why does it matter that we have women, that we have young people, that we have people with disability in government and in politics?
I think for a country with the kind of diversity profile such as Nigeria has, inclusion is not only a wise strategy, but also a right. The second thing about inclusion being important is if a government, and starting with our constitution, says we the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, meaning from that grand norm, from that rule, law, it envisages that every Nigerian, irrespective of the disposition that person may have, intellectually, physically, or whatever, is inclusive in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So to begin to handpick and to dish out tokenism is simply against the letter and spirit of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Okay. The third reason why it is so important that inclusion happens, because of our diversities. When people feel excluded, either as a block of ethnicity, religion, physical, they feel aggrieved, and their right to express that aggression or that exclusion is then muzzled by some laws here and there, then that is dangerous for the nation.
Let me ask Mr. Kamaluddin, from the perspective of people with disability, what does inclusion do as opposed to exclusion?
Yeah, let me start by saying, I think the later we answer the earlier we answer the later. First and foremost, when you exclude people from any areas of life, then you deprive them of opportunity either to serve their nation, to get a gainful employment, to participate in social activities. So when you do this, you reduce people to the entities. So these people have the capacity as well as you do. They're ready to do their own part, contribute their own part to the economy. But due to one thing or the other, due to your own belief, perhaps lack of political will, then you exclude them, then you deprive them of a lot of things, including self-actualization.
So they're less human, basically, as a result of being excluded, is what you're saying. What are the consequences of a lack of inclusion on a society, Ms. Josephine?
When you exclude people, be them young people, women, persons with disability, you are basically such a country that does that, you're denying yourself on your growth. Because you're excluding, women is 50, like Saudatu said, you had persons with disability. We'll be talking about maybe about 65% of people already have been marked out. How can such a country have meaningful growth? You are saying that these persons cannot contribute to the growth of the country. You're leaving them out completely.
Is there, as far as you know, a correlation between a country's development and inclusion or a lack of inclusion?
Very, very much so. Very, very much so. Because if you, it's for me, it's commonsensical in the sense that you have 6 children. You have 6 children, for example, and then in deciding what is going on in the family or whatever, you leave out 4, for example. How do you think, number one, you're causing a friction, the house is divided. There's a potential problem here because people are already, the family, those 4 excluded will be getting restless. They are bottling up, because already you've left them out. And then the 2 you are using, for example, how are you sure that those 2, what they have to say or their contribution is better than those 4 that you left out? So definitely it affects the economy, the growth financially, and every other aspect of life.
Now, the numbers in sort of African parliaments, and I don't know if we can put up the numbers so that even people at home can see. If you look at the parliaments of South Africa, Ethiopia, Angola, Rwanda, we're talking about a female representation that sort of goes from sort of 35% to as far as 50 and 65.
Senegal, 43.
Yeah.
Senegal, 43%.
So for you're a member of the National Assembly. Do you feel that lawmaking suffers as a result of the absence of women, younger people, as well as people with disabilities?
Well, as much as I support the 35% policy paper as it affects women, in terms of election, I know the government before this had come out with some incentives to encourage women to come into politics. I know something that has to do with election, you cannot force it down somebody's throat. Women are free. In fact, I remember then, women were allowed to pick nomination forms free. This was one of the incentives that was introduced. The idea is to encourage women, and if it comes to electing them, it's a different ball game altogether. It's left for the electorate to take the decision by themselves. It is during appointment that government will have been able to enforce women participation at that level, since you have made it a policy statement, a policy position that you are appointing 35% to go ahead and do it. But if it comes to election and you say 35% and they go to contest and the woman loses, you cannot superimpose the woman who lost the election.
So what is it do you think that makes countries like Rwanda, Angola, Senegal countries that are African like us, similar culture, similar traditions, why is it their women seemingly are able to get elected into parliament, where our women here are not? As an insider, what insight can you share with us regarding what the problem is?
I know women that are with us in the parliament have done very, very well, extremely well. But on how they found their ways into the parliament is what I cannot say, because I know it depends entirely on credibility, you know, how credible you are and how you've been able to sell yourself to the electorate. This is my own opinion. I know in some areas, cultures, like they said, play some roles, you know, but I don't think it should be to a level of, you know, isolating them. My own religion does not isolate a woman from contesting election, as much as there are definitions of, you know, parity.
Let me bring in Hajia Saudat to here. This is an argument you often hear that says, well, you know, we're not stopping women from contesting.
Yeah.
They can contest. It's just that when they contest, they don't win. We're even giving them, yes, you know, things for free, etc., etc. What do you make of that argument?
It's a hollow argument. It's a hollow argument because political parties, like I said earlier on, need to be the drivers of the political change that brings women into elective positions. Right from the point of the membership of a political party, we keep educating women that politics is not a party. It is a profession. If you decide to go into it, you need to play it by the rules. And there are women that are in the game that have been there a long time, even in the longest standing political parties in this country. And they know the ropes. But monetization of the process, balkanization of elections, particularly primaries, because beyond the primaries, it is no longer an individual's game, it is a political party's game. It is at the level of primaries that internal party democracy has failed women. It has failed those who have no money. It has failed those who have no name. Even suffer as they may have for their political parties, they don't make it after. Through the primaries.
Okay, and we will tackle.
It is not just about capability. And distinguished senator, I don't know whether it is a nuance we are getting from you that capability is a factor in who comes to office. I think we should have that as an argument for another day. Thank you, Kadria.
Okay, I will let you talk, but I want to engage members of the audience.
I think probably Mrs. Mahdi has misconstrued what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Whoever wins election, there must be a factor. It is either you are accepted, you know, capability is a subjective word. It depends on how you look at it, from whichever part of the country, which community, where you come from. What is capable to a community A may not be capable to a community B.
Okay, and I
now,
think,
so let us not over, you know.
I hear you, and I think it's a conversation around, because we've got someone who is sitting as a sitting senator, who's sort of in a political party. I guess the insight we were hoping to get is why people like you don't elect women, because, you know...
why we don't elect women?
Yes.
As members of the parliament?
Yes. Because you are a voter as well. You're a member of a party. So what are the things that stop men in political office, men who are contesting?
Okay, now let me give you an example. In the last election,
okay,
the State Assembly election, I had a preferred candidate in another party, but I couldn't have left my own party to go and vote for her. In my own judgment, she was a better candidate to me, based on the credibility question I raised that you are making reference to. Now, I couldn't have jumped from my party to go and elect her. It's not to say there are no capable women. They are there. It is probably the campaign drive. Okay. If it's not sufficient enough, you know, to garner support, you may not win. So these things are not done in the realms of media. You go to the grassroots, reach out to the people, and, you know, you sell yourself to them.
Okay. Questions, comments, can you keep it as short as possible? Your name. Okay, so we'll take like 3 before coming back to the panel. The gentleman in front here in green, the lady in black, and then the gentleman in the striped shirt. So let's do these 3 first. The gentleman in front here in green. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Prince Adelabu. I'm a leader of people with disability in Nigeria, and I'm a politician too. You see, when you talk of participation of people with disabilities in political parties, people with disability must participate fully from the ward level, their constituency. You must go to meetings, you must register, have a membership card, and then contribute your quota, not only in terms of money, but in terms of meetings and activities or mobilization of supporters. Before you call yourself a good politician, you must play a very key role. You must be well known. You must be a very good mobilizer.
So am I hearing you saying that you don't think people with disability are making the sort of commitment that is required to get them into office?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is this. Getting into political appointment is not automatic. You have some role to play as a politician. You cannot just say because you are disabled, then you must be this. But what I'm saying is this. Political will of people in power matters most. You don't wait for them to call you. You move towards them. Let me give you an example. I traveled to Jigawa State. I met Governor Sule Lamido. And I said, Your Excellency, how can we have a person with disability in the House of Assembly in Jigawa State? He said, how do I do it? It's by election. I said, Your Excellency, you can ask the man in that place to step down, the abled man, to step down for a special person. And this is exactly what he did, using his political will as Honorable Saibu.
Thank you, sir.
Become a member of the House of Assembly.
Thank you, sir.
So,
the lady behind you, because
okay,
different people want to talk. We don't have a lot of time. Yes.
My name is Mrs. Adune Udu. I'm the MD CEO of Akons Nigeria Limited. I contested in the last election because I watched things over the years, and I said, no, we cannot go on like this. We must do something. The good people cannot watch. I decided to contest the election. And what we have in Nigeria, we tell you, is not democracy, but it's demonstration of craziness. Because you see they use the youth for violence, and the women cannot be involved in that because we are built that we should nurture. We should nurture these young people. We should build the nation. We should be involved in conflict resolution. And what are we giants of Africa for? I don't understand. We like to answer the name, but we are not performing what we should do. I'm happy with the senator who said that there are women that are capable. There are some women that are more than capable. I have a very successful company, but I think violence is something, and I want to help the youth. That's why I'm in politics.
Thank you. Thank you. The gentleman at the end there.
All right. My name is Razak Adekoya. I work with Okay, thank you very much. Let me just stand. My name is Razak.
No, don't stand up. Please sit down. Yes.
Okay, so my name is Razak Adekoya. I work with an international NGO, Site Savers. Two key things. We've talked about policies, but there is also the other component of the processes. When it comes to people with disability participating within the politics in the grassroots, the processes are not inclusive, and they are not actually deliberate. It's a deliberate attempt because oftentimes people with disability have engaged with a lot of political parties. The programs as well. So if you look at it, you need to look at it from the component of policies, processes, and program. The second thing is when it comes to appointment, what we have now is that most times appointments are done on the basis of you are a person with disability, come and be the special advisor for people with disability. And what we are saying is people with disability have the capacity to function in other areas from finance to engineering to ICT. So stop appointing, even if you are to appoint people with disability, you necessarily not need to appoint people with disability to become a special advisor to the president or governor on disability.
Yes. Okay.
The last thing I will just talk about is the narrative in the media. Oftentimes the archaic word which we use oftentimes, which is the narrative, has to do with there is ability in disability. But we say we as a person with disability, I'm a blind person, we are changing that. And what we are saying, which we need to drive more to the public, and public could assist, there is productivity in disability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, before I get the panel in, there's a bit of data that I thought maybe I should share. So the World Bank Chief Executive, Christina Georgieva, said, for example, that no economy can grow to its full potential unless all people, women, men, people with disability, participate. And then there's some figures that kind of actually show the International Labour Organization found that when you exclude people with disabilities from the world of work, countries lose as much as 7% of their GDP. That's a little bit high. And then countries like Sweden are believed to have increased by 6 trillion their economy, which is almost 50% of economic growth, by having full female employment. Are these numbers that make sense to you, Haji Assadutu?
These numbers do make sense, and it's also, I think, the World Bank that once had a statement to the effect that it's smart economics to have women in governance, to have everyone included in governance. And it's simple arithmetic, Adria and my co-hosts, that a nation needs every effort that can come from its citizens. And like we have seen, the rudimentary arithmetic is that between 49% and almost 13% of disabled persons, you are having almost 60. How can a country that, emasculates the contributions of that number of people expect its economy? Meanwhile, the economy is also built on about 4 or 5 tripods. One of the major tripods is the small income earners. And the small income earners are in the bracket of women and persons with lack of opportunity, not disability, absence of opportunity. So if our microeconomy, which is driven by this excluded mass, does not contribute to the GDP, it means obviously that our economy cannot walk on 2 legs. It will remain working on 1 leg.
Senator, we were talking earlier about women in lawmaking.
Yes.
And you are one of the people who kicked against the gender parity bill when it was put forward in the House of Reps. Now, a lot of women would argue that, in fact, one of the reasons why it is imperative that we get women into lawmaking is precisely because men are deciding what should happen to women. And so in many ways, you are stealing our agency. Does that kind of make sense or not?
Well, I think I was greatly misunderstood. We tried to pass the bill at about the same time, but the gender equality bill couldn't sail through, obviously because of religious beliefs. Now, the Persons with Disability Bill passed through, like I told you, is being signed into law. That of the gender parity is, I found it very difficult as a Christian. And I say this without fear of contradiction, that it has nothing to do with undermining the integrity of women. No. In fact, greater part of my life, a child.
So what about your faith makes it difficult? Yeah.
Why is making it difficult? If you say women are free to be president, women are free to be governors, there is nothing wrong about that. But when you said equality, this equality connotes a lot of things. In my own religion, for example, when you say a woman and a man, in fact, the Bible speaks glowingly about the glory of women. It does not demean women, but it says women should submit to the authority of a man in the home. No. Let me come to that. I'm going to quote it. Listen, the submission I'm talking of, I'm not saying women is not allowed to become governor, to contest election, to be appointed. That is not what I mean. In terms of spirituality, is in Ephesians chapter 5.
But the National Assembly is not a church.
No. Listen, I'm coming to that. I know it's not a church, yes, but I am guided. I am guided. The submission we are talking of, we tend to forget the origin of this struggle because it has its own spiritual defilement from the beginning. I'm going to take you to the history of that. Let me give you an idea how it started.
Unfortunately, I have to go for a break, okay, but we will carry on.
Yes. And I'm going to tell you more about why I am opposed to that.
Do not go away. Welcome back. We are talking about inclusion in governance and in politics. Before the break, distinguished Senator, you were talking about how your Christian religion was the basis of your opposition to the gender bill that was defeated in the House. And I promise I'll give you time to quickly round up.
Yes.
Okay, so 30 seconds.
Yes. If it were stressed that offering equal opportunities to both women and men. No quarrel about that. Now, it said equal, I mean, whether in dignity of persons or whatever it's called, I don't understand. But what I'm saying is the origin of this struggle is traced to Margaret Sanger, who revolted against a family union in the early stage of Catholicism. A man and a woman lived together with their daughter, the daughter now being called Margaret Sanger, who is the founder of the Parenthood Federation. Now, the disagreement came because she felt, how would the woman live under the husband who was beating her?
Okay,
the Christianity does not allow man to beat a wife.
I don't want to digress from this conversation, but I'd like members of the audience to come.
I was giving you a highlight on why I oppose the bill.
I understand, but
yes.
is it clear?
I think
these are some of the issues that we have to look at, isn't it? The cultural, the religious issues that we referenced earlier, that we say are an issue. I mean, I remember you saying when it comes to voting, they don't seem to count. But somehow they seem to count when it comes to allowing women to be fully human.
No, I think our women must do greater work in mobilization at the grassroots.
Let her answer.
Well, I'm lost for words. But I will say this. First of all, please, I need to send a message across about the title of the bill. The bill is titled Gender Equal Opportunities Bill. It is aimed at ensuring that men and women in this country get the equal opportunity to education, got the equal opportunity in governance, has no inclination to equality in the home between the leadership of a man. It recognizes the leadership of a man, and it has nothing to do with equating a man and a woman. That is the first subject matter.
Well,
now we are looking for.
Okay, let's.
Excuse me. Let me just. Distinguished Senator, let me just go on. The second thing is when you speak about equality in dignity. I'm a Muslim. You're a Christian. I know for a fact I cannot quickly put on the surahs, but it is one area in which Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says there is an equality of dignity and piety before Him. Who is better is the one who fears him most and worships him better.
Okay, I don't want us to digress.
We will not
digress. I want
us
to come back to this issue of inclusion.
Okay, I'll come back to that.
And how we deal with some of the challenges that appear to be the reason why inclusion isn't happening.
The challenges I know that are oft brought forward. One is in the level of, in what level a woman can even be in governance. She cannot be a governor, but she can be a member of House of Representatives for the reasons of, okay, how does she lead men? How does she deal with the family responsibility? How does she deal with her basic nature? It's supposed to be that the leader could lead in prayers, but what happens to her? She cannot be an imam. Those are all the things we see. Another excuse also we have from the South is she cannot break cola, she cannot do this and that. All issues, warped around her basic nature, which she cannot change, but which she can bring to bear in helping to develop this country.
Okay, I want to just, because we've got very little time left, I want to bring in a few members of the audience. You really have to, it's literally a minute and a half for the three of you. So you know how to share. Starting with the lady in front, then the lady in yellow, and then the two gentlemen at the back. And then that's it. Come back to the panel and we'll close it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Ekaite Judy Tumo. I'm the chair of Disabled People's International African Region, and I just wanted to add to the conversation. I'm hearing the panelists say everything about exclusion and inclusion, and this boils down particularly to how we see ourselves. One, the society has been socialized in such a way to see us and not being able to do this or what we can or cannot do. For women, is whether we like it or not, patriarchy is playing up here again. And that is the basic fact. For persons with disabilities, it has to do with the barriers we face. And it's what we cannot do every time is what we've been judged by. So I think for us to have real social inclusion in society, we must begin to look at the barriers that this group of people face. For women, what are the barriers? And for persons with disability, what are the barriers? So that we can harness our potentials. Otherwise, we'll keep failing.
Thank you. The woman in front. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Irene Patrick Owogu. I'm the Executive Director of Disability Rights Advocacy Center. And I'll just piggyback on what the previous speaker just said. and what the distinguished senator was raising in terms of culture and tradition and religion, those are the driving forces or the driving factors for the exclusion of women, persons with disabilities, young people. This notion that you know, there are certain things you can do because of your gender and certain things you can't do. There are certain things you can do because you have a disability and certain things you can't do. And all of that is what has kept us where we are today, is what has led to all the exclusion and discrimination that persons with disabilities face. Very interestingly, at the intersect of women and disability are women with disabilities. And the level of discrimination that women with disabilities face is triple than what women without disabilities face. You'll be surprised that even when the women's movement is advocating for inclusion, the voices of women with disabilities is not heard in the movement. The same thing with the movement for persons with disabilities. Okay, women with disabilities are also lost in the conversation.
Thank you.
So these are some of the issues.
The gentleman behind, literally 10 seconds each. That's because you allow the women.
It's David Obinna Anyele. And the question is, what is Nigeria going to lose for not including people with disabilities? It's simple, that development policies of the federal government of Nigeria under President Muhammad Buhari will not target people with disabilities. He has done it for the past 4 years. And by singular reason of not including people with disabilities as ministers, what that means is that nobody will speak for people with disabilities at the policy table. He has done it before, and he's about to do it again. And we don't want using people with disabilities to decorate appointments. That is to say, you just, you know, bring somebody.
No tokenism.
Yes, he's there. Okay. Can you see him? We have it. No, we don't want that. We want competence. We want participation. We want people who can lead this country by reason of bringing in disability inclusion.
I literally have a minute to close this program, so we have to hurry.
My name is Tibet Inedu. I'm a consultant to Hayat Foundation for children, people with cerebral palsy and special needs. The narrative has been skewed right from the beginning, because when you begin to look at it, the issue of culture, religion, and the rest, and the patriarchal nature of the Nigerian society, it tells you the whole story. We begin to talk of, like the distinguished senator was saying, that even was quoting the scripture just now, but the Bible says you should love your wife. So the person you don't love, that is the person you exclude.
Okay, thank you.
That is why the inclusion is becoming very paramount.
We have to wrap this up, and I'd like to start from this end and work my way there very quickly. There seems to be a general consensus that a society does better with inclusion. So enlightened self-interest. How do we get the men in policy decision-making positions to actually understand that it is in their interest to include everybody?
Honestly,
because we seem to keep talking and nothing's changing.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll wrap up by saying, I mean, I think the senator, the one mistake in this discussion was the word equality, because it keeps bringing us back. Like everyone is, I mean, because we can't run away from the issue of patriarchy and all of that. And that is what women do. What I do in my home is different from me in the office and out there, you know. So we need to address this issue of seeing equality as one big problem. We need to leave religion out of this issue.
Okay. So what can we do to convince you and people like you to become partners?
What I want to encourage Nigerian women
inclusion
to do is to carry their campaign to the grassroots. I am an advocate of inclusion. I do not object to that. But I think there is a misunderstanding about the bill, the gender parity bill. Why? Because the impression given, there must be a separation between religion. You cannot say a world will exist without God. If you say no religion, then that you are saying that you are just meeting up with the devil's advocacy.
No, I don't want to get into an argument about whether religion has place in public life or not.
My advice to our Nigerian women is let them increase the tempo of mobilization.
Thank you.
In the rural area.
Aja?
I will just wrap up by saying I plead with the goodwill and the good office of Mr. President.
It doesn't seem to work, though.
It will work. Why it will not work? Not that it doesn't seem to work. You see, Kadria, we must...
I'm talking about the pleading.
I'm not just... You know, it's not plea as in I beg. What I'm saying is I'm appealing to his sense of justice, to his sense of the goodwill he portrays for the country called Nigeria, and to ensure that every Nigerian gets the opportunity to help him deliver on what he has promised.
And unfortunately, they are going to cut me off if I don't end this. We have run out of time, and I want to thank everybody. I apologize to my brother here for not getting a last word in. On behalf of Channels Television and Daria Media, I'd like to thank the MacArthur Foundation and PLAC for funding this program, and for all of those people who came in here and shared. Thank you so much for coming. Join us in September for another edition of The Core. Have a very good evening.